January 27, 1945. At 27,000 feet over the Pacific, one B-29 bomber faced 14 Japanese fighters. Two had already rammed it. Ice coated the guns, hydraulics were failing, and a single engine struggled to keep 32 tons of steel in the air. The gunners gripped frozen controls, hearts pounding, bullets tearing through the sky. Every second was a fight for life. Alone, crippled, and surrounded by enemies, the crew's courage was tested like never before. With danger closing from every angle, survival seemed impossible, but what happened next would defy everything they knew about war. At 11:42 a.m. on January 27, 1945, Staff Sergeant Robert Chen pressed himself against the central fire control station of the B-29 Superfortress Aquar 52. Frost crept across the plexiglass as the massive bomber climbed through 28,000 feet over the vast Pacific. Only 22 years old, Chen had flown 11 combat missions over Japan, but had yet to record a single confirmed kill. That morning, Japanese forces had launched at least 40 fighters to intercept the strike on Tokyo. As the youngest gunner in the 497th Bombardment Group, his hands remained steady on the controls, operating 4 remote gun turrets that bristled along the fuselage. Each turret mounted twin .50 caliber machine guns, deadly tools that Chen had fired only twice over Nagoya and once along the Japanese coastline, yet never with the satisfaction of seeing a fighter brought down. Since November, the 73rd Bombardment Wing had launched relentless missions from Saipan, each following the same unforgiving pattern. Precision bombing at 28,000 to 30,000 feet, where temperatures plunged to 50 degrees below zero and jetstream winds lashed the formation, making even minor adjustments nearly impossible. Every mission, Japanese fighters climbed rapidly to intercept, testing the bomber crews against the full fury of the Pacific skies. By mid-January, the 73rd Bombardment Wing had already paid a heavy price. 31 B-29s lost to enemy fighters and flak, along with 340 brave crew members. The deadliest blow came on January 14th over Nagoya, when 5 superfortresses were destroyed in less than 20 minutes. German Panther and Tiger tanks had taught American tankers the cost of weak armor, but Japanese fighters were now schooling bomber crews on the limits of altitude. The Nakajima Ki-44 could reach 28,000 feet in under 8 minutes, a speed that made it a lethal threat. Americans called it the Tojo, Japanese pilots knew it as the Shoki. The name translated as Devil Queller, and it was a fitting warning. The Ki-44 was armed with either 4 12.7mm machine guns or 2 20mm cannons, making it a deadly opponent. At extreme altitudes, where the air was thin and B-29 gunners battled frozen mechanisms and oxygen deprivation, a single fighter could strike again and again with near impunity. Even more terrifying were the ramming attacks. Beginning in August 1944, Japanese pilots deliberately collided with bombers once their ammunition was spent. This was not kamikaze ideology, it was cold calculation. One fighter for one bomber was a cost they deemed acceptable: $600,000 and 11 highly trained crew members. The 47th Sentai, stationed at Naramesu Airfield near Tokyo, operated a specialized air superiority unit trained in this deadly ramming tactic. American intelligence estimated that the squadron had already destroyed at least 3 B-29s this way and severely damaged 7 more, forcing them to be written off after emergency landings. Aquar 52 now carried 6 tons of high explosives, its target, Tokyo's vital port facilities. Reconnaissance aircraft reported clear skies over the city, a blessing for the bombing run, but also a curse. Clear skies meant the formation had to fly steady and level, offering enemy fighters the perfect opportunity to strike. Clear skies also gave the Japanese fighters precious time to maneuver into lethal firing positions. Chen had been briefed on the odds hours earlier. At 0400, 62 B-29s would take part in the strike, and intelligence predicted that 9 would never return. As the formation crossed the Japanese coastline at 11:58, the enormity of the mission settled over him. Every man on board understood the danger, and every second from this point on would test their courage, skill, and luck against the most relentless enemy fighters in the Pacific theater. Japanese radar operators on Honshu immediately picked up the formation, and air raid sirens screamed across Tokyo. At Naramesu Airfield, pilots sprinted toward their fighters, already warming up and ready for combat. Precisely at noon, the first Ki-44S lifted off, banking southeast to intercept the incoming bomber stream. 43 fighters in total. Aquarius 52 now faced more enemy aircraft in a single mission than any B-29 had ever encountered, its crew about to be tested against an overwhelming storm of steel and fire. The first enemy fighter appeared 12,000 yards out, a tiny dark speck climbing almost vertically through scattered clouds. Through his optical sight, Chen watched it grow, wings becoming visible, until the unmistakable radial engine cowling of a Ki-44 came into view. The fighter rolled inverted at 27,000 feet and dove toward the formation's lead element. 3 more fighters followed in rapid succession. Chen swung the upper forward turret to meet the attack. The remote control system allowed him to aim guns mounted 15 feet away, while a computer adjusted for airspeed, altitude, and the B-29's forward motion. Revolutionary technology, but at 50 degrees below zero, temperamental and unforgiving. At 800 yards, the lead Ki-44 opened fire. Tracers arced through the sky toward the formation. Chen squeezed the firing button, and the turret roared, unleashing .50 caliber rounds at 2,800 feet per second. The Ki-44 rolled sharply to the left and vanished beneath the bomber stream. No hit scored. The fighter had broken off too quickly. By 12:07, the formation was under full assault. Enemy planes attacked from every direction. Standard tactics called for high-side passes from 11 o'clock, diving at 400 miles per hour before braking hard left or right to avoid the B-29's concentrated fire. Close-range attacks were rare, except in ramming maneuvers. Chen's aircraft commander called out a fighter at 2 o'clock high. Rotating the upper turret, Chen tracked a Ki-44 preparing a deadly beam attack at 700 yards. The Ki-44's nose aligned perfectly with Aquar 52, aiming for a deadly strike. Chen led the fighter and unleashed a precise 3-second burst. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds tore across its flight path. The engine erupted in flames, black smoke billowing from the cowling. The fighter rolled inverted and plummeted, trailing fire. Chen's first confirmed kill. There was no celebration. 2 more enemies were already maneuvering into position. The B-29's right blister gunner opened fire with twin .50s, while the tail gunner called out a fighter closing from 6 o'clock low. Using the central fire control system, Chen slaved the lower aft turret to his sight picture. He fired and missed. The tail gunner picked up the target, stitching rounds across the Ki-44's wing. The fighter shuddered, pieces of aluminum skin peeling away under relentless fire. The damaged fighter went into a flat spin, Aquar 52's second confirmed kill. By 12:19, the formation reached the initial point for the bomb run, the moment of greatest vulnerability. For 6 tense minutes, the bombers would fly straight and level, synchronizing their Norden bomb sights. No course changes. No evasive maneuvers. The enemy knew this. 14 Ki-44s formed up 3,000 feet above the bomber stream, orbiting once, twice, lining up for coordinated attacks designed to penetrate the B-29's defensive fire. At 12:21, they rolled in. Chen counted each fighter through his sight, heart pounding as the storm of steel closed in. 1, 2, 3, for fighters dove in pairs. One from 10 o'clock high, the other from 2 o'clock high, plunging toward the formation simultaneously. Textbook attack maneuvers, forcing the B-29 gunners to split their fire and cover every angle. The first pair opened fire at 1,000 yards. Chen tracked the lead fighter, tracers from his turret converging with rounds from 2 other B-29s. The Ki-44 flew straight into the crossfire. Its canopy shattered, and the fighter snapped sharply to the right, colliding with its wingman. Both aircraft exploded in a storm of fire and twisted metal, Aquar 52's third and fourth kills. But the second pair used the chaos as cover, closing to 500 yards with guns blazing. Chen swung his sight to the nearest fighter. It held its course. No evasive maneuvers. No retreat. The enemy pilot had committed to a ramming attack. Impact in 4 seconds. Chen held his aim, the upper forward turret hammering the Ki-44S engine cowling with a relentless stream of .50 caliber rounds. Sparks danced across the fighter's nose as the distance closed, 300 yards. 200, trailing smoke, but still accelerating. 100. At 12:22 p.m., the Ki-44 slammed into Aquar 52's No. 3 engine. The collision rang out like a steel hammer striking a locomotive boiler. The fighter's propeller tore through the cowling, metal shrieking as the B-29 yawed violently to the right. The Ki-44's wing sheared off, its fuselage cartwheeling over the bomber before disappearing into the air below. Shards of aluminum and steel rained past the turrets, and Chen felt the entire aircraft shudder under the impact. Warning lights blazed across the flight engineer's panel. No. 3 engine was on fire, while No. 4 was losing oil pressure. The aircraft commander quickly shut down both right-side engines and activated the fire suppression system. Aquar 52 now limped along on just 2 engines, dropping out of formation at 300 feet per minute. Alone, damaged, a perfect target. 3 Ki-44s peeled off from their attack pattern, diving toward the crippled bomber with both altitude and speed advantage. Standard doctrine dictated that damaged bombers be finished before they could jettison bombs or regain maneuverability. Chen swung the upper turret into position, bracing for the first assault. A Ki-44 dove from 1 o'clock high, closing fast, 1,000 yards and shrinking. Chen steadied himself, waiting as the targeting computer calculated a firing solution on the maneuvering fighter. 3 seconds felt like an eternity. 800 yards. The enemy's nose lit up with cannon fire, rounds punching through Aquar 52's left wing. Hydraulic fluid sprayed from severed lines, steam and sparks mixing in the frigid air. At 600 yards, Chen fired a controlled 4-second burst. Tracers struck true, the Ki-44's canopy shattered. The fighter rolled left, tumbling through the sky, trailing debris. Aquar 52's 5th confirmed kill. Another attacker emerged from 5 o'clock level. The tail gunner engaged first, twin .50s hammering for 6 seconds. The Ki-44 cut through the tracer stream, still closing, 400 yards and gaining. The tail gunner's weapons went silent, ammunition completely spent. Chen quickly slaved the lower aft turret to his controls, though the mechanical linkage responded sluggishly. Hydraulic pressure was dropping across every system. Forcing himself to stay calm, he tracked the incoming Ki-44 manually and fired a precise 2-second burst. The rounds tore through the fighter's left wing, which folded upward under the stress. Structural failure sent the Ki-44 tumbling end over end before it broke apart at 12,000 feet. Aquar 52's 6th confirmed kill. But the third attacker had been waiting, using the chaos as a diversion. A Ki-44 now hovered at 3 o'clock high, 300 yards out, wings level, nose locked on the bomber's cockpit. Its guns were silent, ammunition spent. A second ramming attack. The right blister gunner opened fire. Rounds sparked along the Ki-44's engine, but the fighter held its course. Chen swung the upper turret hard to the right, the mechanical stops screaming under the strain. He fired, tracers missed high. Overcorrecting, he squeezed off another burst. This time, rounds stitched across the fuselage. The Ki-44 shuddered but stayed on target. At 100 yards, 50 impact, the fighter slammed into Aquar 52's No. 1 engine. The propeller disintegrated instantly, shrapnel tearing through the wing. The No. 1 fuel tank ruptured, spraying aviation gasoline into the slipstream. The Ki-44's fuselage split in half. The tail section tumbled over the B-29's flight deck, while the engine and cockpit section smashed into the left wing, ripping a 6-foot hole in the leading edge. Aquar 52 now limped on a single functioning engine. No. 2, descending through 18,000 feet, airspeed dropping below 160 miles per hour, a wing leaking precious fuel. The hydraulic system was failing, and 12 more Japanese fighters were forming a third wave. Chen's hands were numb, the temperature inside the unpressurized gun station plunging to minus 62 degrees. His oxygen mask had frozen to his face, ice crystals coating the optical sight. He scraped them away with a gloved thumb and locked onto the incoming attackers. The 12 Ki-44s split into 3 groups of 4, executing classic wolfpack tactics. One feinting high, another striking low, and the third poised to exploit any gap in the bomber's defense. Against a fully operational B-29, this tactic was devastating, but Aquar 52 was far from fully functional. Against a crippled bomber with failing hydraulics and only partial gun coverage, it was a perfect storm for the attackers. Aquar 52 plummeted through 16,000 feet, the single operating engine struggling to keep the damaged wing aloft amid massive drag. The aircraft commander gave the order: jettison all non-essential equipment, ammunition cans, tool kits, survival gear. Every pound mattered. From 12 o'clock high, the first group of 4 Superfortress Dove Chen engaged the lead fighter at 900 yards. The upper turret responded sluggishly. Hydraulic pressure had dropped to 30%. He fired anyway, the recoil shaking the entire mount. Tracers arced toward the diving attacker. The Key-44 jinked right. Chen tracked and squeezed off a second burst. The rounds tore into the fighter's left wing. Fabric shredded, internal structural members exposed. The wing folded under the damage. The crippled bomber listed violently, its single engine straining against the drag of a damaged wing. The remaining 3 Key-44s closed in from multiple angles, their guns blazing. Chen rotated the upper turret with frozen fingers, each movement sluggish from both hydraulic failure and the sub-zero cold. Tracers stitched across the sky, sparks illuminating the B-29's battered fuselage. One fighter swooped low, attempting a beam attack. Chen held his breath, led the target by instinct, and fired a sustained burst. The Key-44 shuddered violently, pieces of aluminum peeling away as it spiraled out of control. For a moment, the bomber hung in the sky, hanging on by sheer skill and raw luck, a single steel bird defying impossible odds. Chen took control manually, relying entirely on instinct and the lessons from 11 previous missions. He fired, a short, precise burst that struck low, sparks flying off the Key-44's belly. The fighter veered hard left, smoke trailing from its engine. Probable kill. Without pause, Chen shifted to the next target, a Key-44 diving almost vertically from 400 yards out. He unleashed a 6-second sustained burst, his gun barrels overheating despite the sub-zero temperatures. Tracers streaked across the sky, each round hammering the fighter's engine cowling. The propeller ceased spinning, windmilling uselessly, and the fighter's nose plummeted. It passed beneath Aquar 52's left wing at 200 miles per hour before vanishing into the clouds. 8th confirmed kill. Amid the chaos, a 4th Key-44 maneuvered into position for a beam attack from 9 o'clock level, closing to 500 yards. The left blister gunner opened up with his twin .50 caliber guns. The fighter jinked violently, closing to 300 yards, and unleashed a long burst from its cannon. Shells tore through Aquar 52's left horizontal stabilizer, snapping control cables. The bomber yawed sharply, the rudder jammed hard left. The aircraft commander fought to maintain control, applying right aileron and adjusting throttle on the single functioning engine to counter the spin. Chen tracked the attacker beneath the fuselage, slaving the lower turret. The mechanical linkage groaned and stuttered, halting after 15 degrees. Hydraulic failure had rendered it useless. The tail gunner took over, mechanically firing a precise 4-second burst as the Key-44 pulled up from its attack run. Chen's round struck the Key-44's tail, severing its rudder. The fighter spiraled into an uncontrollable flat spin. 9th confirmed kill for Aquar 52's crew. But there was no time to celebrate. A second wave of 4 Key-44s was already converging, diving from 2 o'clock high. Aquar 52 was at 14,000 feet, descending rapidly, airspeed dropping to a perilously slow 140 miles per hour, teetering near stall. With only one engine producing thrust, the damaged wing and jammed rudder made controlled flight nearly impossible. Chen had just 15 rounds left in the upper turret. The lower turrets were offline. Blister gunners were low on ammunition, and the tail gunner had barely 60 rounds remaining. For fighters closed in fast, splitting into 2 coordinated pairs, ready to strike. Years of combat had taught the Japanese pilots that even crippled B-29s were far from defenseless. Coordinated attacks from multiple angles were essential to overwhelm them. The first pair dove from 2 o'clock high, while the second pair maneuvered into position for a follow-up from 4 o'clock level. Chen tracked the lead fighter in the first pair, closing the range to 800 yards. The upper turret responded sluggishly, jerking against the failing hydraulics and leaking fluid from ruptured lines. Chen steadied himself, waiting for the perfect moment. At 700 yards, he centered his sights and unleashed the last 15 rounds in one sustained, controlled burst. Tracers streaked toward the Aquar engine, striking with precision. Sparks danced across the cowling as rounds tore through metal, the propeller disintegrating in violent shards. The engine seized completely, smoke trailing from the fighter as it flipped inverted and plummeted. 10th confirmed kill for Aquar 52. Chen's upper turret clicked empty. His primary defensive position was now useless. Without hesitation, he scrambled through the connecting tunnel to the unpressurized rear section. The right blister gunner lay wounded, shrapnel through his shoulder, unable to fight. Chen slid into position just as the second fighter from the first attacking pair dove in, closing fast at 600 yards. Chen gripped the twin 50 caliber guns, relying solely on raw strength. No computer guidance, no hydraulic assistance. Every movement of the massive turrets demanded physical force and complete focus. The Aquar closed to 400 yards, unleashing a torrent of cannon fire through Aquar 52's right wing. Chen tracked the fighter, squeezing the trigger as recoil slammed into his shoulders. Spent casings clattered into the collection bag while tracer rounds struck the enemy cockpit, shattering the canopy. The Aquar snapped left, tumbling violently through the air, 11th kill confirmed. Yet there was no time to celebrate. The second pair of attackers was already diving in, intent on finishing what the first had started. The second pair of Aquar closed from 4 o'clock level, spaced 300 yards apart, guns blazing as they advanced. One aimed directly for the flight deck, while the other targeted the wing section housing the fuel tanks. The tail gunner reacted instantly, unleashing a 5-second burst with his remaining ammunition. Tracer rounds stitched across the Aquar's nose, and the fighter's windscreen shattered. Forced to pull up sharply, the aircraft broke off its attack, plummeting through the clouds at 11,000 feet. 12th kill confirmed, pilot unseen. The lead fighter of the pair wasted no time, pressing forward relentlessly for its next strike. Chen swung his guns, but the angle was off. The blister turret couldn't reach far enough forward to cover the 4 o'clock high attacker. Momentarily blind to the threat, he relied on the left blister gunner, whose position had better forward coverage. The gunner fired his final 30 rounds, striking the Aquar's left wing. Fuel sprayed from ruptured tanks as the fighter banked sharply to escape. The damaged wing couldn't withstand the stress. Structural failure tore through the spar, and the wing separated. The aircraft tumbled violently, confirming Aquar 52's 13th kill. 1 bomber, 1 crew, and 13 Japanese fighters downed. 13 confirmed victories, but the tally meant little to Chen. Aquar 52 was plummeting through 12,000 feet, the jammed rudder making controlled flight nearly impossible. The damaged wing strained against the air, threatening to tear away entirely. And now, the third wave of 4 Aquar's was closing in, the final attackers. Japanese pilots operated under severe fuel limitations. The Aquar's combat radius at full power was roughly 200 miles. They had been airborne for 40 minutes and had perhaps 10 minutes of fuel before being forced to return to Naramesu. 10 minutes, just enough to make every second deadly. The 4 Aquar's fell into a tight line abreast formation, not a dive, not a high-side sweep. They were preparing for sequential ramming attacks, for fighters, for deliberate collisions. The Japanese pilots had calculated that even a single impact could destroy Aquar 52. Chen pressed his face to the small blister window, watching them maintain 14,000 feet, 2 miles behind, matching speed and altitude, lining up for the final, deadly run. He had no ammunition. The tail gunner was empty. The upper turrets were dead. The lower turrets were dead. There was nothing left to stop them. Aquar 52's defensive guns were spent. For fighters closed in, and the bomber hovered helplessly at 12,000 feet over the Pacific. The lead Aquar in the ramming formation picked up speed, ranging 1 mile, diving slightly to build velocity. Standard ramming doctrine dictated at least 300 miles per hour to ensure the target's destruction. Slower impacts could leave a bomber limping but intact. Chen pressed himself against the blister window, powerless. No guns, no ammunition. No options. The aircraft commander struggled to maneuver, but the jammed rudder left him with almost no control. The B-29 could bank gently left or right, but violent evasive maneuvers, enough to throw off a fighter's aim, were impossible. The Ki-44 closed to half a mile, and Chen could now make out every detail. The dark green camouflage, the red Heinemer's circle on the fuselage, the yellow spinner marking it as part of the 47th Air Unit. Its nose was fixed squarely on Aquar 52's vertical stabilizer. Impact in 15 seconds. Black smoke trailed from the fighter's engine, not from enemy fire, but from a mechanical failure. Nakajima Ha-109 radial engines were notoriously temperamental at sustained high power. Pushing to maximum combat output for extended periods often sent cylinder head temperatures beyond safe limits, leading to engine seizures. The Ki-44's propeller ground to a halt. With the engine completely failed, the fighter could no longer maintain its intercept course. Losing speed and altitude, the pilot tried to restart the engine, but it wouldn't respond. The aircraft tumbled away beneath Aquar 52's tail. The ramming attempt had been thwarted, not by defensive fire, but by mechanical failure. The 14th kill was credited to Aquar 52, without a single round fired. No gunner claimed it, yet the fighter was lost, succumbing to battle damage and an already overstressed engine. Later intelligence reports confirmed the Ki-44 had crashed into the Pacific, 18 miles east of Tokyo. The pilot did not survive. 14 confirmed kills. 1 B-29. 1 mission. This became the highest single mission tally for any bomber in the Pacific theater. The remaining 3 Ki-44s aborted their ramming attempts. Critically low on fuel, they turned northwest toward Naramesu, climbing away as the deadly engagement finally ended. Aquar 52 had survived the engagement, but survival at 12,000 feet over enemy territory with a single functioning engine was far from the same as returning safely to Saipan. Chen climbed back through the connecting tunnel to inspect the damage alongside the flight engineer. The assessment was grim. The number 1 and number 3 engines destroyed by ramming attacks, number 4 offline due to oil pressure failure, and number 2 running but dangerously overheated. The left wing had sustained structural damage. The right wing was leaking fuel, hydraulic power was down to 15%, and the rudder remained jammed. Tragically, the bombardier had not survived. The right blister gunner was critically wounded, the radio compass was damaged, and 1 life raft had been destroyed by enemy cannon fire. Saipan lay 1,512 miles away. At the current airspeed, the flight would take approximately 11 hours, but fuel calculations showed a maximum endurance of only 9 hours if the number 2 engine continued to function without failure. The numbers were grim. The flight engineer proposed a daring solution: restart the number 4 engine. It had been shut down after the first ramming attack due to low oil pressure, not destroyed, not irreparably damaged, simply a precautionary shutdown. Running the engine without adequate oil risked total failure within 30 minutes. But even a short burst of thrust might provide just enough airspeed to reduce fuel consumption and extend their range. The aircraft commander gave the order. Number 4 coughed to life, running rough but producing thrust. Aquar 52 accelerated to 170 miles per hour, well below normal cruise speed, but enough to slow the descent. The bomber leveled at 10,000 feet. The formation had pressed onto Tokyo without them. The mission had succeeded. The bombs had been delivered, and other B-29s were already turning south, heading back towards Saipan. Aquar 52 was isolated over the vast Pacific, crippled with 2 damaged engines, failing systems, and dwindling fuel. Chen carefully repositioned the wounded blister gunner, applying pressure bandages to shrapnel wounds. The morphine in the first aid kit had frozen solid. Pain relief was impossible. The gunner remained conscious but continued to lose blood. If they were to reach Saipan, it would take 11 grueling hours. At 1,420 hours, just 28 minutes after restart, the number 4 engine failed completely. Cylinder heads had overheated beyond design limits, and internal components seized, leaving the bomber with only a single functioning engine. The propeller windmilled for 0.6 seconds before coming to a complete stop. The aircraft commander feathered it, cutting fuel flow and reducing drag. Aquar 52 was now flying on a single engine. Altitude began bleeding off immediately. 10,000. 9,500. 9,000 feet. The lone Curtiss-Wright radial on the number 2 position was now the only thing keeping 32 tons of battle-damaged bomber aloft. The navigator recalculated fuel reserves, 7 hours at best. Saipan was still 900 miles away. The numbers were grim. The flight engineer proposed dumping the bomb bay fuel tanks to lighten the load and stretch their dwindling chance of survival. The auxiliary fuel tanks, originally installed to extend the B-29's long-range missions over Japan, were now empty but still added roughly 400 pounds of useless weight. At 1,445 hours, the crew jettisoned them. Aquar 52 responded immediately, climbing slightly and regaining 100 feet of altitude. Fuel consumption improved by 6 minutes, a small gain but still far from enough. Chen remained at the right blister, tending to the critically wounded gunner. The shrapnel wounds had stopped bleeding, yet the man was slipping toward shock. In the unpressurized fuselage, his core body temperature was dropping rapidly. Chen tore the heated liner from his own flight suit and wrapped it carefully around the wounded gunner. The battery-powered heating elements still functioned, independent of the B-29's failing systems. At 1,500 hours, the navigator spotted a potential lifeline, Yoma. The island lay 640 miles away, still under Japanese control, untouched by marine landings. Yet American submarines occasionally surfaced in nearby waters to rescue downed crews. If Aquar 52 could somehow reach the waters off Yoma and execute a controlled ditching, there was a chance, however slim, that a submarine might retrieve them. The aircraft commander immediately dismissed the plan. Ditching a B-29 in open ocean carried only a 40% survival rate under ideal conditions. Attempting it with severe structural damage to both wings and a jammed rudder would almost certainly be catastrophic. Even if the crew survived impact, they would be stranded in hostile waters with minimal survival equipment. The grim decision was made. Saipan remained the only viable destination. By 1600 hours, Aquar 52 crossed the international date line. The navigator marked their position, 700 miles from Saipan, with just 5 hours and 40 minutes of fuel remaining. The margin was perilously thin, and time was running out. The flight engineer began systematically shutting down all non-essential electrical systems, navigation lights, cockpit instruments, heating elements, and interior lighting. Each system drew power from the single functioning engine, and reducing the load eased its strain and improved fuel efficiency. Inside the unpressurized fuselage, temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees. By 1730, a formation of fully operational B-29s that had completed the Tokyo mission passed overhead at 18,000 feet, maintaining tight formation and cruising at 270 miles per hour. Aquar 52, damaged and struggling at 8,000 feet, limped along at just 160 miles per hour. At that rate, the flight to Saipan was projected to take 7 grueling hours, far longer than any of the healthy bombers overhead. Fuel exhaustion was projected in just 4 hours and 50 minutes. By 1800 hours, the right blister gunner had lost consciousness, his breathing shallow, pulse faint. Chen remained at his side, monitoring him constantly, but medical options were limited to the frozen morphine cartridges and improvised pressure bandages already in use. At 1845, the number 2 engine began running rough. Cylinder head temperatures climbed into the red zone, and oil pressure fluctuated unpredictably. The engine had been pushed at maximum continuous power for nearly 7 hours, far beyond the Curtiss-Wright R-3350 radial's rated 4-hour limit under normal conditions. And these were anything but normal conditions. The flight engineer eased the throttle to preserve the struggling engine. Airspeed fell to 150 miles per hour. Fuel consumption improved slightly, but the estimated time to Saipan stretched even further. By 1900 hours, the navigator calculated they were still 400 miles from the island, with only 3 hours and 20 minutes of fuel remaining. The numbers were still impossible, but slowly closing. At 2000 hours, the right blister gunner ceased breathing. Chen fought to resuscitate him, but the frozen air and heavy flight suit made chest compressions nearly futile. After 4 grueling minutes, the flight engineer reluctantly called time of death. The body remained where it was. Moving it would have drained precious energy the crew needed to survive. The number 2 engine labored on, cylinder heads glowing red, oil pressure wavering between 40 and 60 psi, but it held. Minimum acceptable oil pressure was 50 psi. The engine teetered on the brink of catastrophic failure. At 2100 hours, the navigator spotted distant navigation lights. A Navy destroyer patrolled 20 miles south of Yuma. It could offer no assistance, no fuel, no lift, yet its presence confirmed the navigator's calculations were correct. By 2145, fuel gauges read just 30 minutes remaining. Saipan lay 120 miles ahead, requiring 48 minutes at the current airspeed. The numbers still did not work. The flight engineer acted decisively, transferring every drop of remaining fuel from the empty wing tanks to the No. 2 engine's dedicated reservoir, squeezing every ounce of life from the bomber's last functioning power plant. Fuel pumps, cross-feed valves, and emergency systems all worked in unison. Every remaining drop of aviation gasoline was routed to the B-29's lone functioning engine. At 2200 hours, Aquar 52 was 60 miles from Saipan. Fuel gauges showed just 15 minutes. The navigator could make out the runway lights of Ely Field at the southern tip of the island. Distance, 8 miles. The bomber descended through 4,000 feet when the No. 2 engine coughed from fuel starvation. It caught again, ran smooth for 20 seconds, then coughed once more. The propeller windmilled, the engine fluctuated, but held. At 3 miles from the runway, 2,000 feet altitude, the tower cleared Aquar 52 for an emergency landing. Crash crews stood ready, hearts braced for impact. Ambulances were positioned along the runway, ready for the worst. The landing gear refused to extend. Hydraulic failure had taken its toll. The flight engineer cranked the emergency handwheel. The nose gear locked into place. The left main gear followed, but the right main gear remained retracted, crippled by earlier fighter attacks. 1 mile from the runway, 1,000 feet above the ground, the No. 2 engine quit completely. Fuel exhaustion. The propeller stopped. Aquar 52 became a 32-ton glider, aluminum and steel, powerless, with lopsided landing gear. The aircraft commander lined up the runway. Airspeed 130 miles per hour. Descent rate 800 feet per minute. Too fast. Too steep. The B-29 crossed the threshold at 300 feet, still far too high. The bomber touched down halfway along the runway at 110 miles per hour. The left main gear collapsed instantly. The aircraft yawed violently to the left. The left wing scraped the tarmac. Metal screamed. Sparks erupted. Aquar 52 skidded nearly 1,500 feet before finally coming to rest in the dirt beside the runway. The surviving crew climbed out through the rear escape hatch. 10 men made it. The bombardier and right blister gunner had not survived. The aircraft was declared a total loss. The structural damage was beyond repair. Yet in that single, harrowing mission, Aquar 52 had flown 1,512 miles on a single engine, shot down 14 Japanese fighters, survived 2 ramming attacks, and brought 10 men home. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do us a favor, hit that like button. Every single like helps YouTube share this story with more people who deserve to hear it. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the forgotten stories we uncover every day. Tales of crews, gunners, and pilots who fought with courage, skill, and determination. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community spans the globe. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us if someone in your family served. Let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Staff Sergeant Chen and the crew of Aquar 52 are never forgotten. These men risked everything, and your support ensures their heroism echoes through history.